Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad to have you here today. We're expecting more than 700 of you on this webinar, and it's so exciting to see the interest in our Gender Fund country level grants from across the globe. My name is Guhe, and I'm a manager on Co-Impact's program team based in Kenya, and I'll be running the logistics of this webinar. I'm now gonna let the rest of the team introduce themselves, starting with Alfonsina.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for making the time to join us. My name is Alfonsina Peñalosa. I'm a director of programs for Global and Latin America, and once again, welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miriwandia. I'm director for programs for Africa, and I'm very delighted to join you today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yasmin Madan. I'm also a director on the programs team and joining my colleagues in thanking you all for your time today. Super excited to be here with you. Back to you, Guhe.
Thank you so much. Jackson, if you could stop projecting, please. Great, I think that's right. So we're just going to go over a couple of the webinar housekeeping rules for today. So this is the final one of our 3 webinars. We're going to try our best to make this clear and smooth and helpful, but some things may not work out. So we do ask that you bear with us. So during this webinar, we plan to share more about the open call, our goals and approach, provide an overview of grant types and requirements, and share details of our application and timelines, and respond to all your questions. We've set aside a lot of time for your questions. If you'll just give us a moment to get the right slides up, that'd be great.
Guhe, I think we're having some technical challenge. Would you like me to project from Jackson? I think we are not able to see the projection section of your slides.
Just 1 minute.
Great, I think that makes sense. Thanks. Yes, we are. Thank you, Jackson. All right, so next slide, please. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to start off with the Gender Fund overview and considerations. Then we'll go into an overview of the grant types. We'll go into the application process and requirements. And then finally, you'll see we have time for Q&A, and we've split it up into 2 parts, pre-submitted questions and live questions. We do ask that you wait until we're done with our presentation to submit your questions to the Q&A function. Today, we are using just the Q&A function and not the chat function. So we'll give you about 5 minutes once the presentation is done to submit your questions. We will try and get through as many questions as we can, but there may be some left unanswered. Thank you so much for your understanding. And we really appreciate everyone who already submitted their question in advance through Slido. We are sharing this webinar and we'll share the recording and slide deck with you afterwards. We'll be sending out a short 5-minute survey for your feedback on how we did and what we can do to improve. We'd be very grateful for your feedback. So I'm now going to hand over to Wandia to get us started with the overview of Co-Impact and the Gender Fund.
Thanks, Nguhe. So I'll take you through an overview of the Gender Fund and considerations. Jackson, next slide, please. So the Gender Fund. Some of you may be familiar with our foundational fund, as we have made 3 rounds of grants over the past 3 years. Our focus in the foundational fund is on systems change in 3 sectors of health, education, and economic opportunity. This open call is for the Gender Fund. Our vision is to advance gender equality for all people to live fulfilling lives. Gender Fund builds on the learning from the foundational fund and has expanded scope to advance gender equality into important. First, while we continue our core focus on systems change in health, education, and economic opportunity, it is with a clear objective to how these systems impact women and girls. And we have added focus on women's leadership within these sectors. Second, we also look to support institutional change to advance women's leadership in law and economics. These 2 domains have an inordinate influence on public policy, national priorities, and resource allocation. Yet today, women are significantly underrepresented in the academic and professional institutions within these domains. You can literally count the number of central bank governors or judges in international courts in a few hands, and that's totally unacceptable. All of you here are doing critical work and providing services to improve lives. No doubt that is important and should be resourced. Our funding focus is on achieving equitable and inclusive impact at scale that is enduring over time. So, everything we fund is systems or institutional change, by which we mean the formal and informal ways in which systems and institutions are organized, policies and practices, how different actors in the systems and institutions experience and exercise power, how capacities, incentives, norms, and motivations drive behaviors of the system actors. As a funder, ultimately, we care about changes in people's lives, what we call people-level outcomes. And we believe that the most powerful way of achieving these outcomes is through systemic and institutional change. We also recognize that this requires feminist approaches, dismantling the status quo, addressing structural barriers and exclusion, and reorganizing the rules of the game. Who has power and whose voice is heard, who is included and who has influence. This open call gives us an opportunity to partner with Global South and local rooted organizations, especially those that are led by women, that bring feminist approaches to advancing gender equality. I'm now going to move on.
Hi, Wandia. So sorry to interrupt. Wandia, we are getting some feedback that the audio is unclear. We are having trouble hearing you. Is there a way to fix your audio?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now it's clear. Thanks so much, Wandia.
Okay. Was it so bad, or I should just move on?
I think okay to continue, and definitely, you know, we have a lot of information to cover, so a little slowly would be great.
Okay, I'm now going to move on to the next part on considerations. Jackson, please move to the next slide. We will now share with you our considerations that will help you understand our principles, why we prioritize this in our qualification and selection process, and importantly, help you determine if you are eligible for the Gender Fund. As we share with you our considerations, we also want to confirm that all of this information is provided in our open call document. Please read that document carefully and really consider if this makes sense for your initiative and organization. It will save you a lot of time and effort. We have also noticed that a lot of the questions are about the considerations. So hopefully, this information will help answer most of your questions. Next slide, please. Our first consideration is Global South-rootedness. Our experience with the Foundational Fund has shown us that the importance of working with locally rooted organizations that are committed to the cause and the context. Global South organizations have deep roots in the countries where they work, understand the local context and governance, have the political savvy and trusted relationships, and long-term commitment. All of these are critical for system and institutional change. So this round of funding is for initiatives that are led by organizations rooted in the countries that the initiative is based in. For lead organizations to qualify, they must meet 2 out of 3 of our criteria. The first criteria is that the global head office and majority of total staff are in a global south country. What this means is that we are requiring that the lead organization's center of decision making, as well as the majority of its team and operations, are located in the country where the initiative is proposed. The second criterion is that the leader of the organization or the initiative and at least 50% of the senior leadership are from the global south country. And the third and last is that the lead organization or initiative has long-term roots in the country, working on strengthening systems in the target country or region, and can demonstrate long-term working partnerships with local actors and commitment to investing in local talent for leadership positions. Please note that an initiative is only eligible if an organization meets at least 2 out of the 3 criteria at the time that they apply. This is a minimum bar. If you meet all 3 of these criteria, then you receive a higher score. We often get asked if Global North organizations can apply. We certainly recognize that Global North-based organizations may provide significant value to an initiative and bring opportunity for global learning and technical support. We welcome concept notes that include Global North organization as partners in the initiative, but they may not be the initiative's anchor or lead organization. Next slide, please.
Wendia, we're just unfortunately, your sound hasn't improved. So if it's okay, we're gonna ask Yasmin to take over from here, just because we're able to hear her just a little bit clearer, and hopefully when you join us again, it'll be a little bit clearer. Yasmin, will you go ahead?
Thank you, Kuhe, and thanks so much, Wendia. So I'll speak to the women-led consideration. We believe that the initiative and the organization's leadership matters. So our grant making will be enhanced when we have a stronger representation of women leaders in our portfolio. We also know women-led organizations have been historically underfunded and undersupported. So we hope this open call is an opportunity for all of those organizations to apply and partner with us. For the Gender Fund, we will make at least 75% of the country-led grants to organizations that are substantively led by women. So what do we mean by substantive? First, the primary leader, as well as a significant portion of the senior leadership of the lead organization, are women. Second, the governance structure, example, the board, has significant or increasing representation of women. This does not mean that we will not fund any male-led initiatives, but our intention is to fund at least 75% women-led across all grant types. Next slide, please. I will now speak to the geography consideration. So we have selected a set of countries based on their basic threshold of governance and civic conditions. We will only support initiatives that are based in the countries that are listed here in the 3 regions. A question we get asked often is about supporting multi-country or multi-regional initiatives. Your initiative may have a more regional scope and could include some countries that are not on this list, as long as the bulk of the work that is proposed is in the countries listed here. So what do we mean by bulk? At least 2/3 of the work should be in the countries listed here, in which case we will accept multi-country, multi-regional initiatives. We hope the 3 considerations we shared with you help you determine if you are eligible for the Gender Fund. Please note there will be no exceptions to the 3 considerations that we have shared. I will now hand over to my colleague Alfonsina to talk us through the grant types.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. As Yasmin mentioned, I'm going to walk you through the different windows of opportunity for grants that we have available for you. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, actually, Jackson, could you go 1 slide back? Apologies. So in the Gender Fund, we have developed 3 grant types to increase opportunities for us to support different initiatives across a wide range of organizations. There are multiple ways to advance gender equality. Some organizations, for example, focus on technical models or approaches to support government or market systems. Others aim to strengthen governance or management of systems. Some organizations are part of movements that seek to catalyze and sustain change. Many engage in advocacy for policy change or to tackle deep-seated norms. We recognize the importance of the diversity of these approaches, and hence no one grant type is more important than the other. They each have a purpose and requirements that we will now share with you so you can determine where your initiative may best fit to respond to our open call. Next slide, please. The Anchor Grant is meant to support initiatives that aim to transform systems of health, education, and/or economic opportunity to advance gender equality. We selected these 3 sectors because these systems provide the most basic services to millions of people, services that are foundational to women's lives. So let's start with what we mean by a system. This can be a school system or a sexual and reproductive health system or the employment system. Sometimes it might involve more than one system. For example, if you work on gender-based violence, your initiative may span health and education or economic systems. There are many ways in which you understand and work within these systems in these 3 sectors. What really matters for Anchor Grants is that the focus is on changing or transforming these systems, tackling the root causes of their dysfunction so that they can work at scale. To distinguish, we will share a few illustrative examples with you here. We do not support organizations who provide community health services to improve access to quality health. Rather, we're interested in how these organizations can support and strengthen national health programs for better community health. Some organizations advocate for the provision of childcare services for informal workers, a very important topic. However, at Co-Impact, we want to support initiatives that seek for national livelihood programs to incorporate better governance and engagement of women and girls in the informal market so that their work, their voices, and their experience is part of defining and implementing economic policies. Overall, for us, it is not about creating parallel structures to address the symptoms of system failure, such as lack of access or affordability, but more about the root causes of that failure, understanding the challenges to the health and economic rights of women and girls so they have the same opportunities to lead fulfilling lives. Initiatives supported by Anchor Grants will also aim to have impact at scale by including those who are often left behind by the systems. For us, systems working at scale means they work for the last mile. In other words, they reach and serve every person they are designed to, including those historically marginalized. We realize that scale can be understood in many different ways. We're not looking for direct reach or for scaling up. In other words, we're not looking for your initiative to serve millions of women directly, but rather that the solutions to the system you propose can indeed impact millions. We also encourage you to read our handbook that's available online and translated to other languages to understand the principles we refer to for systems change initiative. There are also several examples on our website of the initiatives we are supporting across health, education, and economic opportunity, which you can refer to. Finally, as systems change takes time and requires patience, the Anchor Grants provide substantial support, between $5 to $20 million US, with relatively flexible funding over a 5 to 6 year period. Next slide, please. The domain grant is a new type of grant for co-impact, and it's designed to support initiatives that focus on institutional change to advance women's leadership in the domains of law and economics. We're often asked, what is the difference between the domain grants and the anchor grants? An anchor grant in economic opportunity, for example, might seek to tackle the root causes of failures in the economic system for women. A domain grant, however, might focus on how women enter, grow, and thrive or not in the academic and professional field of economics or law. So an anchor grant focuses on the economic systems. A domain grant focuses on the institutions that determine the rules of the game of how this field, either law or economics, operates. The institutions that produce, support, and hire professionals, and the leaders who influence public and private policy, resource allocation, and national priorities. And the focus is on advancing women's leadership as professionals, economists and lawyers in these fields, and the institutions that shape them within these domains. Just like when we talk about systems in the earlier grant type, we will explain how we think about institutions for the domain grants in two main ways. Critical institutions are those main institutions that influence public policy, resource allocation, national priorities, and gender issues. For example, the Ministry of Public Policy, the Ministry of Justice, of Planning or Finance, and many others. The pipeline or supporting institutions are institutions that could be, for example, associations, professional associations or networks, or convening agencies or academic institutions that create the formal and informal pathways into the critical institutions. We are totally open to other ways in which you might think about institutions and what makes sense in your context. What matters is that the focus is on institutional change and not limited to a few individuals. So to distinguish, we will share a few illustrative examples with you here. In the domain grants, they're not about building skills and leadership capabilities among a few women or helping a select group of women to get opportunities in their leadership journey. We're interested in supporting collective and inclusive leadership, either systemic or institutional, changing the rules of the game so that any woman has a fair chance of entering, growing, thriving, and exercising power in these professions. It's about looking at the policies and the practices, both formal and informal, in these institutions, how women are hired and how recruitment biases are addressed, how women are promoted and what networking and mentoring opportunities they get. We're particularly interested in an intersectional and feminist lens that focuses on women who have been historically marginalized. It's about the formal and informal rules of the game, the gender supportive policies for women, and it's about changing mindsets and cultures so that the institutions become a place where women are encouraged to join, supported to thrive, and able to rise to leadership positions. We encourage you to refer to the hypothetical examples we included in our open call and a few more here. For example, we know that women face many obstacles that women do not. Sexual harassment at universities and work, undue burden of childcare, which reduces time flexibility for writing, publishing, or traveling to conferences. Women also have much less opportunities for networking and mentoring. A potential domain grant could include work with an academic institution, an international organization, and a network of professional associations, all working on concrete policies, resource allocation, and implementation plans to reduce these burdens for women already in the field. Another option could be something less traditional that targets some of the gender norms that determine what women study or even what area of expertise. Although women today enter the field of law more than men, it's not the case for economics. In both fields, they are dissuaded from focusing on more quote unquote male perceived areas of economics or law, such as macroeconomics or penal law. These tend to be areas that are more visible, better paid, and more quote unquote respected by the field. We do see efforts that focus on what type of policies women leaders might promote. For example, gender-sensitive tax policies or better policies to tackle gender-based violence. This is important, no doubt, and matters, but our focus in the domain grants is one step before. Let's get more and better representation of women leaders, regardless of the outcomes. In other words, we're not interested in the instrumentality of women leaders, but value their leadership as an important end in itself. As we shared, for this grant type, our goal is to advance women's leadership as professionals in the field. Within this, we welcome your approaches to feminist leadership and collective leadership of women and girls. The grant details are an amount of between $2 to $4 million US over a 5 to 6 year period. Next slide, please. The Catalytic Grant is also a new grant type for Co-Impact, and it's designed to support organizations who have been historically under-resourced and under-supported and haven't had the chance or the resources to build out their strategies with a longer-term vision. This grant type will be 100% for women-led organizations, given the historical underfunding of these. Even in this grant type, our guiding star is still systemic or institutional change. As shared previously, we are not looking for initiatives that plan linear scaling or provide direct service delivery. We're looking for initiatives that will work through the system or the institution to benefit a much larger group, but that need the time for the scale to manifest. One way to think about catalytic grants is to think of them as pre-anchor or pre-domain stage, as you can see on the spectrum on this slide. So the focus of these initiatives could be either the 3 sectors of health, education, and/or economic opportunity, which would be a pre-anchor grant, or either of the 2 domains of law or economics, which would be a pre-domain stage grant. Catalytic grants are intended to support initiatives that have the potential for enduring impact at scale, but that need the time and the resources, a longer runway, to do the following things: demonstrate feasibility and viability of an approach, or test ways to truly solve the root causes of the problem, and/or invest in partnerships and form winning coalitions as needed by any systemic or institutional approach. As seen in this table, we have listed what does and what does not fall in this category. I will now hand over back to my colleague Yasmin to talk us through some key things in the application process.
Thank you, Alfonsina. Next slide, please. So before I share with you the requirements by grant types, I want to do a recap as we've shared a lot of information with you so far. So first, we want to acknowledge that all of you do really important work in the world, but please note that this open call window is for a specific narrow type of work being done. Many organizations do not do systems or institutional change that we are looking to support through this open call. So please note our emphasis is really on systems and institutional change. And our scope is really clearly defined. For anchor grants, it's systems change in the 3 sectors of health, education, economic opportunity. Domain grants, it's institutional change to advance women's leadership in the 2 domains of law and economics. And catalytic grants are very similar to anchor and domain, but are at a slightly earlier stage, and as Alfonsina said, needs a longer runway. Next slide, please. So this table here summarizes our requirements by the 3 types of grants. It is included in page 8 of our open call. So please review the open call carefully and look at the requirements, as these tend to vary by grant type. I will highlight a few of the points here regarding evidence, track record, and organization capacity. So let's start with evidence. Overall, our approach to evidence really is about what gives you the confidence that the model, the idea, the approach that you've proposed will have the desired outcome in your context. For anchor grants, we require a summary of your best evidence, your evaluation or assessment showing that your core model or idea will achieve the outcomes for the people that you're aiming for. We do not require this to be third-party evaluation or to have a specific methodology. From our side, the ask is it should be robust and relevant. And so the more rigorous and relevant it is, and relevant we mean, has the evidence been in the context that you're working or a very similar context, again, to give you the confidence, the higher you will score. For catalytic and domain grants, the evidence is recommended but not required. However, sharing evidence does definitely make a stronger case for your initiative. So please do review the open call and our FAQ documents, as well as we have very clearly listed what we do and what we do not accept as evidence. The next, track record. Again, the requirements vary by grant type. So we often get asked catalytic grants and the requirements about the 2-year, that you've been working on the initiative for 2 years previously. So as my colleague Alfonsina shared, we think of catalytic grants as supporting initiatives that are not in the initial exploration or what we often tend to call a proof of idea stage. They really are in that proof of scales phase where they're prior to being an anchor on a domain grant. And for that reason, our track record requirement for catalytic is 2 years. For domain grants, it's 3 years. And for the anchor grant, it is 5 years. So again, as we said, these vary by grant types. So please do take a look. For organization capacity, our requirement for anchor grants is we require financial audits and a minimum budget for the lead organization of at least $500,000. But for domain and catalytic grants, there is no minimum budget for the lead organization. So again, we get asked this question very often. So worth repeating here, we do not have a minimum budget or an audit requirement for domain or catalytic grants. This table has been included in our open call document. We tend to get a lot of questions related to this. So we do encourage you to reference it, because what we are trying to signal here is our interest in partnering with a range of different organizations, doing different types of initiatives. And so we varied our requirements by grant type to allow for those windows of opportunity. Next slide, please. I will now talk to the application process. So what does it take for you to complete your application in our portal? As you know, we launched our open call on 30th of September, and we are already seeing a number of applications that have been started in the portal. We are also noticing incomplete applications, so we want to cover this section in detail to ensure that you're able to complete and submit your application. We are also noticing ineligible applications, primarily from countries that are not on the list. And we feel bad because we will not be reviewing these applications. And so unfortunately, that required time and effort on your part that may be wasted. So please note that we will not review applications that do not meet our eligibility requirements. So we want to be mindful of your time and effort. Next slide, please. So the first thing you will see in the online portal is a list of questions right up front to help us get to know your organization and your initiative. Please be sure to complete these questions as honestly as possible, as we will be verifying this information. This section will also require you to clarify which grant type you're applying for. It states a grant preference. And as Alfonsina shared in the previous section, we have 3 grant types, each with a unique window of opportunity to match with your initiative. So the portal allows you to select primary and secondary grant type. Please consider carefully how your initiative's focus aligns with the purpose and the requirements by grant type. The primary grant type is what we will reference to score your initiative. During our review process, we may recategorize your grant type to the secondary preference you have stated, but this will only apply to those applications that are invited to move to the next stage of our process, that is invited to submit a detailed proposal. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the second requirement is the concept note. We have provided a template for you to complete a simple concept note. Each section of the template includes guidance to help you describe various aspects of your initiative, including the problem, your systems or institutional change approach, your proposed impact over a 5-year period, your track record, the partnerships you have in place, and your team. We have designed this form to keep the lift at your end light, and we are requesting a concept note that is maximum 4 pages. Within this template, we've also provided guidance, including page limits for each section. So please stay well under those. They are there because we really want to minimize the effort required from you while ensuring that we get the information we need to fully assess your initiative. The template and the page limits are a requirement. We are unable to review applications in a different template or applications that are submitted without the concept note. Again, we have noticed a few of these in our portal, so please be sure to use the concept note template and refer to the guidance. To be fair across applicants, to balance effort on your part, and to ensure ability on our part to review, we will only review applications that use the template. You will find a PDF template of this on our website, in the application portal, and in the open call document. We have also included a link here for the English version, and our website has the template for all 6 languages that we accept. You can submit the concept note in Word or PDF. Our preference is for you to submit the concept note in English, but we will accept additional 5 languages, including Bahasa, French, Portuguese, Spanish, and Tagalog. This is very much in alignment with our commitment to the language justice. Next slide, please. The third part is the evidence summary. Again, to simplify things, we have provided a simple 1-page template for you to complete the summary of your evidence. Please remember, this 1-page summary is a requirement for anchor grants, and it is recommended for domain and catalytic grants. The template here is slightly different for anchor grants compared to the other grant types. So please take note of that and use the relevant template for your application. At this stage, we do not require you to submit detailed documentation or links to your evidence. As we get further into the process, we will request that, but for now, you just have to submit a 1-page summary. Next slide, please. So I'll bring it all together. We have the completed intake form that has basic information about the organization and the initiative. A concept note where the template has been provided. Evidence summary, 1 page. Again, a template has been provided. And then we have an optional 1-page visual for you to submit. You may upload an optional 1-page visual if you feel it helps you describe or illustrate your initiative. This might be a diagram, it could be a theory of change, or a map of your system, whatever you feel best illustrates your model or your approach. Please note the deadline to submit is 20th December 2020. There will be no extensions to this deadline, so we encourage you to submit the application as early as possible. The portal has been open since 30th of September, and you may go in any time and submit your application. If you encounter any technical difficulties, please email us at the email ID provided here. We are, as Gu has said, will be sharing the slide deck and this recording, so you have all of these for your reference. I will now hand back to Guhe to help us manage our Q&A process.
Thanks, Yasmin. So that was a lot of information. We're going to take a short break here, about 3 to 4 minutes, and give you an opportunity to ask your questions using the Q&A function. Once we have come to the end of that, we'll start by answering your pre-submitted questions. So for now, we'll be collecting your questions. If you could please submit them through the Q&A function. Next slide, please, Jackson. So we'll now go into answering your pre-submitted questions. We've split them up so that there is, so it's easier to comprehend. We have process and content. We're going to kick off with pre-submitted questions under the application process. So I'll hand over to Yasmin.
Thank you, Kuhei. So I'll read the question and give our response. So the question is, we would like to submit proposals targeting 2 countries identified by co-impact. Should we submit 2 different applications or combine the application into one? So our response is, you can submit as a single application. We do accept multi-country, multi-regional proposals as long as the initiative, which in this case it is proposed in the countries in the list we shared with you. Next question. What type of organizations can apply for Anchor Grant? For creating an impact for 1 million lives, one organization may not be enough. Do you encourage coalition to apply, or are only government-backed initiatives asked to apply for this one? So the Anchor Grant really is about initiatives that aim to have impact at scale. And that's why our requirement for impact for 1 million lives or more. To clarify, we do not mean direct service delivery or direct reach or even direct attribution of the impact. From a systems change perspective, we're looking for what changes in the system to improve lives for 1 million people and advance gender equitable outcomes. So really a compelling case of how your initiative contributes to that impact. As I said, we do not fund direct service delivery. So it is not about one organization reaching these people, but often government or public systems or even private systems are providing services to millions of people already, but they're not doing those in ways that are just, equitable, or inclusive. And we're looking for how your initiative aims to change that system to make it more just, equitable, and inclusive. Next question. Is a joint venture where a lead applicant is from the country of focus and another partner from other countries eligible to apply? It is eligible as long as the lead organization is Global South locally rooted. And again, our intention here with the locally rooted is because these organizations understand the context. They understand the political economy, the partnerships, the relationships required, the coalitions required to make change happen at scale. So as long as you bring that, you are definitely eligible to apply. Next question. Where do we upload financial statements that is mandatory for Anchor Grant applicants? The application form does not provide a separate option for it. Excellent question. So at this stage of the application, we do not require supporting documentation. We will request this from you if your application moves to the next stage, but at this stage, you just need to provide the relevant information. Next question. Is there a specific font type or size to be used for the concept note text? Really appreciate this question because as I presented earlier, we have shared a concept note template with you. It has guidance and page limits for the different section and an overall page limit of maximum 4 pages. We've kept this template exactly the same across grant types to make it easy. So please use the template. As long as you use the template and you're within the page limit, you may use whatever font type or size works for you. Please note that we will not review applications that do not use the template. I will now hand over to my colleague Vondia to take a few more questions.
Thank you, Yasmin. So I will answer some of the pre-submitted questions on requirements. Can you hear me?
More or less, Wendia.
Okay, thank you, Alfonsina. There's a question, can the grant funding be directed to an impact fund as investment capital or to help with operational costs, such as technical assistance to entrepreneurs? We are looking for initiatives that aim to bring about systemic or institutional change. So then we need to understand how investment in an impact fund or investment capital would support that change. We are also looking to fund initiatives that are deeply rooted in the context and not likely to invest in impact funds that would then fund multiple initiatives. We do fund for-profit initiatives, and our focus is on outcomes at the people level and systems level. And the approach has to be systems or institutional change. Another question is, our organization primarily operates in India. However, our official headquarters is in the US, mainly for fundraising. Will we still qualify for Catalytic Grant? Our response is that we have criteria for Global South organizations, and applicants have to meet 2 out of the 3 criteria. The first is global head office and majority staff have to be in a Global South country. The initiative or organization's leadership and 50% of senior leadership have to be based in the Global South. And also, we need long-term presence in the country. Overall, we look at HQ location, the initiative's leader or CEO's location, and where majority staff are based. This helps us understand where the power rests in the organization and if it is truly in the Global South. So ensure that you meet 2 out of the 3 criteria on Global South rootedness. There's a question, can UNDP India office be the lead organization in a consortium with Indian organizations? Our response is that multilateral or international organizations may not be the lead organization of an initiative. For the lead organization to qualify, you have to meet 2 out of the 3 criteria I have just mentioned in my previous response. Global South organizations may partner with multilateral or international organizations. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Alfonsina to answer questions on grant types.
Thank you, Andia. So one question we received is, if a proposal for anchor or a domain grant is rejected because it is at an early stage, would Co-Impact automatically review it as a catalytic grant? The answer is, the application portal gives you an opportunity to identify your primary and secondary grant type. We will score your application for the primary grant type you select. If we shortlist the application for the next stage, in other words, if we invite you to submit a detailed proposal and feel that a recategorization of a grant type is needed, we will refer to the secondary grant type. We will not automatically review as a catalytic grant if it is not moving forward as an anchor or domain grant. In other words, if you choose your primary as anchor or domain and your proposal is not shortlisted, it will not be reviewed as a catalytic grant. So please carefully make your grant type selection for your application. If you think that your initiative is at an early stage, our recommendation would be that you identify catalytic as your primary. Another question is, we are a regional organization based in Thailand. Can we submit the proposal to cover the Indonesia, Philippines, India, Nepal, and Thailand? The answer is yes. However, we are interested in understanding your presence in the countries in our list. We are looking for initiatives that are locally rooted in the context, that show a track record of working in these countries, and that have partnerships and an understanding of the political economic context. Please note also that the bulk of the work proposed has to be in the countries of our list. So at least 75% of the activities in the initiative should be in those countries. A few more questions. Can we apply for a catalytic grant for a regional initiative in Asia across India, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Sri Lanka? The short answer is yes. We will consider multi-country and multi-regional initiatives across all grant types. Regarding the Catalytic Grant, is there an opportunity to build in research and adaptive learning into the project at different stages? The answer is yes. We do look for research and learning approaches across all grant types. We recognize the importance of building in learning and adaptation into any initiative that focuses on systems or institutional change. And one last question around catalytic grants. 100% of our catalytic grants will go to women-led organizations in the Global South. Does this automatically disqualify organizations who are not women-led? The answer is yes. If you are not an organization that is women-led, you do not qualify for this grant type, precisely because this grant type is built to provide support for organizations that have been historically underfunded. However, you can qualify for other grant types. I'll now hand over to, I believe, my colleague Yasmin, or maybe back to Guhi, I'm not sure.
I'll take some more questions, Alfonsina. Thank you. Okay, so a few more questions from our side. What is the grant application period from notice to award? So we have shared the timeline in our open call document. The application window closes on 20th of December, after which we will begin the review process, and we hope to make final decisions by October. There are a few more steps in the process that we've laid out in the open call document. Next question, what is the maximum permissible indirect cost rate? So from our side, we do not set a fixed limit on indirect or overhead costs. We focus on the overall budget for the initiative and rely on you, the applicants, to lay out the case for different aspects of the budget, including overhead and your organizational strengthening needs. Next question, if we are not approved for a grant, do we get the reasons explaining the same? Unfortunately, no, we will be unable to provide individual feedback to the initiatives that do not move forward in our application process. Next question, if we apply in partnership with other organizations, all based in India, will all partners need the FCRA certification or just the lead partner? So from our side, this requirement is for the lead organization in India. And again, as long as it is compliant with the local requirements in country. Next question, can an organization submit an application for each of the 3 grants? So the response here really is in the application portal, as I shared, you get to select your primary or your secondary grant type. We are also looking really, this funding is not about projects. We don't do project-based funding. We're looking for organizations that are committed to an initiative. It takes a lot to do systems or institutional change. We have also made each grant type very specific. Anchor is about health, education, economic opportunity. Domain is about women's leadership in the domains of law and economics. So given this, we are keen on understanding how committed the organization is to the initiative, what its track record has been, the partnerships, its local rootedness. And so we would encourage you to really focus on getting that one application right. And again, we give the choice of primary or secondary grant type. Next question, what is the maximum amount of grant applicable to each applicant? So the range of each grant type is included, and you can come in anywhere on that range and even below the range if that is what works best for your initiative. I'll clarify here about the budget. We aim to understand what is the overall budget required for the initiative, and of that budget, what will be the co-impact contribution. We do not hope to be the sole funder for that initiative. And again, if that's the case at the beginning, we certainly hope that is not the case towards the end of that grant. And so we hope there will be other funders. I hope this helps you determine what the maximum amount will be, not just in relation to the range we've provided, but what really makes sense for your initiative. I'll now hand over to Wandia to take a few more questions.
Thank you, Yasmin. I'm going to answer some questions on requirements. The first question is that the FAQ said that a global North-based organization may be included as a partner, but not as the lead. Would a global North-based INGO be an eligible partner? And it is linked to this question. We are CSO registered in India with the entire staff based in the country. However, intellectual leadership for our initiative would be provided by principal researchers based in US universities who may or may not be of Indian origin. Can we apply? Our response is that Northern-based organizations, as well as research research institutions, cannot be lead for the applications. As long as the lead organization is a Global South organization, then they can join in as partners. What we are looking for is really to ensure that the decision making is locally rooted in Global South organizations. The second question is that the RFP clearly states that the proposed scale-up interventions and impact, including policy changes, had to be women-led. Can you clarify? As we pointed out in our presentation, is that we believe that our grant making is enhanced by strong representation of women among our program partners. So we will ensure that at least 75% of our country level grants are substantively led by women. So we define substantive women leadership as the primary leader and a significant portion of the senior leadership of the anchor organization or initiative are women, and gender composition of the anchor organization's governance structure, such as the board, has significant and or increasing representation of women. So it doesn't need to be 100%. What we are looking for is substantive women's leadership. The other question is, in your scoring rubric, you have shared 3 points, qualifying applicants as women-led. Does having a significant portion of senior leadership as women as the only point makers eligible? As I've just shared, is that the initiative leader has to be a woman, majority of the senior leadership has to be women, and then the governance structure has to have a significant proportion of women. And this is to ensure that at least our funding goes to 75% women-led initiatives. Another question is, sorry, I did not understand well what long-term roots in the country or region means in the criteria. Can it be explained again? Yes, what this means practically is, where is the organization based? Is it truly a Global South organization? It means if you have been doing the work in that context or geography for some time. It also means if the majority of the staff and leadership are from the country where the initiative is proposed, and if investments have been made for building the pipeline for leadership from the local team members. And it means where you have partnerships and connections in the context, as all these factors are critical for successful system change and institutional change. And you see across the grant types, also we are looking at your track record. You know, you've been working on that issue in that context for how long? So for Anchor, 5 years, for Domain 3, and for Catalytic 2. The other question is, I have read the FAQ document. It said that Co-Impact only fund 25 to 50% from the total cost. If we have existing program that ran from 2018 with a total of $5 million US, and we need extra $5 million USD to upscale the program, if we submit if we submit this program with 5 million USD budget for 5 years, is it counted as 100% funded by co-impact or 50% funded? Just to answer that, it will be considered 100% because what we are looking for is to ensure that that we are not funding the entire budget, that other people are also co-funding with you. And you don't need to have that funding in the first year, as you make your application, but we are hoping that you have built the networks and the track record to be able to fundraise for the rest of the balance. I'm going to stop here and hand over to Alfonsina. Thank you.
Thank you, Wandia. I'm going to attempt to begin answering some of the live questions that we've been receiving. And again, we ask for your understanding that we're unable to answer all of your questions. We've received over 100 so far, but please do refer to the FAQ document, which we will be updating with some of these new questions. One is for the Catalytic Grant, do all partners have to be women-led or just the lead partner? The answer is just the lead organization needs to be women-led to qualify for the Catalytic Grant type. For the Anchor Grant reach, the requirement is for 10,000 people in the past year. Can this number be reached by a coalition or must it be by the lead organization alone? The answer here is that the purpose of this requirement is to understand that the initiative is already working at some scale and that it has the potential to scale further. So we are open to considering this track record requirement for the initiative if it's already working at some, sorry, this document is moving, and across the coalition rather than just a single organization, as long as there's a considerable history of working together in the coalition. Finally, please note that this requirement is not for direct reach, but rather how your initiative has impacted the people that you seek to serve. A question under domain grants. Are government institutions and professional associations preferenced over professional associations whose memberships are composed of those from the private sector? The answer is no. There is no preference for any type of institution. The focus of the domain grants is really on the role that that institution plays within the field of law or economics, and how especially your initiative will change how that institution operates. If you can make that argument in that case, there is really no level of importance for the type of institution. Another question, our organization has 51% women as part of the team composition, 43% in the board, and 33% in leadership. Do we qualify for a catalytic grant? Here again, we remind you that catalytic grants are for women-led organizations, and the requirement for women-led is that the primary leader, as well as a significant portion of the senior leadership of the organization, are women. And similarly, that your governance structure has significant or increasing representation of women. If your organization is not women-led, and you cannot show that a significant portion of your senior leadership and your governance is by women, then you are not eligible for the Catalytic Grant. Can you provide a concrete example of the difference between anchor and domain grants? Because the example you explained, there is still overlap over each other. Is it the number and the scale of the impact that differentiate the two grants? The answer is no. The main difference between the anchor grants is the fact that the anchor grants refer to the economic system and how it serves women and girls. The domain grants focus on economics as a professional field, not the policies, and how that professional field serves or fails women as professionals in the field, so not as citizens. So an anchor grant, for example, would focus on how to create a more inclusive tax system. A domain grant might focus on how to eliminate hiring biases at universities so that women have the same chances as men to be hired as teachers and the same opportunities to grow professionally. In other words, the anchor grants focus on the system that serves citizens, women. The domain grant focus is on the professional field and how women as professional are served or failed by that system. Is this a one-time grant, or does it plan to be an ongoing process with the grant opening in subsequent years too? This is still an open discussion for now. We recommend that you consider these grants as a one-time grant. And this is especially relevant for the sustainability of both your initiative as well as the organization, and partially why there is that requirement for other funders to support your initiative. I'll now hand over back to one of my colleagues. I'm not sure what the order is now, to answer more questions.
Thanks, Alfonsina. Happy to take questions. Thanks so much. And everybody, thank you for your interest and the questions. As Alfonsina said, we're doing our best to answer the live questions coming in. We will share this recording, the slide deck. We will also update our FAQ document with you. So hope to answer as many as possible. So starting with the questions, would an organization of trans persons qualify as women-led organization? Excellent question, and yes, they would. When we say women and girls, we mean this in the most inclusive way possible across the gender spectrum. So yes, we welcome these applications. Next question, can you please provide a more detailed definition of what economic opportunity includes or what it means for co-impact? So the answer, there's also a follow-up question, actually. Let me take that. What does economic opportunity entail and what does it not? So the best way to answer these questions is to think about ways that improve economic outcomes for the people you serve. Now, this could be income earning opportunities. It could be increased or improved job opportunities or labor force participation. It could also be value of household assets. In our portfolio today, we have various ways from the agricultural sector to skilling opportunities, to increased participation in the workforce, or to improved assets and land rights over time. There are various ways. Broadly, think about the outcomes. What leads to improved economic outcomes? What leads really to improved economic empowerment for women and girls? And then the different ways that your initiative works on that. Next question, can we have a government organization or a department as a partner? Definitely you can. This is acceptable because again, we recognize that government or public systems are providing services to millions of people. Next question, if an organization has been historically more of a parallel system and recognizes the need for broader systemic change, will you support this shift in terms of their capacity while they do the broader systems work? This is such a great question because yes, we do. It is not just about the strategy, but our resources are intended very much to support organization capacity strengthening needs that the different organizations build. So we definitely support this work. Next question, does systems change mean only with respect to government policy and practices, or could it mean societal systems, such as the systems ingrained through patriarchy? Both. We absolutely realize that there are systems, there are social norms, there are restrictive, discriminatory practices at the community level, at the societal level, within public and private systems and institutions. And so again, we look to you for the compelling case of what that system is and what your systems change approach is within anchor grants. It's health, education, economic opportunity, and for domain grants, it's the domains of law and economics. Next question, can we team up as a team of 3 or 4 women-led groups to apply as one, or do we apply for funds as one group or 3 groups? I think the way to answer this question is about the initiative, right? So we're looking to fund an initiative and we recognize that an initiative has a lead organization and then it has partnerships and coalitions. So if The different women-led organizations have been working together. There is a partnership in place. There is a need for this coalition to come together to make change happen at scale. Absolutely, please apply as one. As long as it is a cohesive initiative and you're working towards the same outcomes in the same context. Next question. Can I ask, if I submitted a concept note with a coalition of several CSOs, should there be a leader of the coalition, or should I mention all the CSOs responsible? So again, the way to think about it is there is a lead organization you do need to identify. Our requirements are for the lead organization. And so we do request that the lead organization information is provided. And then in the partnership section of the concept note, please do mention the other CSOs that you will be partnering with. The nature, type, and depth of your partnership is also something that would help us. The next question. This question is from Peru. We are planning on a consortium with the lead organization qualifying, no issues. Is there a limit on the number of non-lead organizations in the consortium? Is there a limit on the fund percentage that is going to the non-lead organizations? So from our side, we do not have a limit. If it is a coalition of organizations, we leave it to you for how many that is and how the funding across the initiative. What we want to understand is what is the role of the different organizations? What is the nature of your partnership? What is the depth of the partnership? We don't support partnerships that have come together just because there's a funding opportunity. But partnerships that have been working together for a long time, absolutely. I think the number and then the percentage of the budget depends on you as the initiative lead. Next question, is it mandatory to indicate secondary preference, or would it be acceptable to indicate a primary preference only? It is absolutely okay to indicate a primary preference only. Again, it shows that you're very focused for what grant type matches your initiative. The secondary grant preference is optional. Next question, at the application process, if we want to send a one-page visual, could we send it in Bahasa or should it be in English? You can absolutely send it in Bahasa. As we said, we accept the concept note in all 6 languages. Because of our team's capacity, our preference is English, but we do accept concept notes in all languages. And we recognize that the evidence summary and the one-page visual would also be in the other languages. Next question. Although our headquarters is based in Mexico City, most of our staff live in the different countries such as Colombia and Paraguay. Do you think we qualify for applying for a catalytic grant? So the way to think about this is, where is the initiative based? In the countries listed here, the focus country for us is Mexico. We are not looking at funding initiatives in Colombia and Paraguay. So we would seek to understand what is the presence in Mexico, what are the activities proposed there, and then what are the outcomes that will be in that context. Next question. Please let us know if there are any criteria for team members who are applying for the fund. No, there are no criteria. What we do have is the women-led criteria. So our intention is to fund at least 75% women-led. As we clarified, when we say women-led, we are absolutely inclusive of how people identify on the gender spectrum. We also looking for majority women in the senior leadership and in the governance structure. I will say here that initiatives that bring an intersectional lens to their team will definitely score higher from our side. So I'll hand over, I'll do a time check with my colleague Guhe and then see if we can take a few more questions. Over to you, Guhe.
Yeah, we have about 7 minutes to go. So I'm happy to hand over to Wendy, and then if you could hand over to Alfonsina, and we'll wrap up there.
Thank you, Nguhe. I just have 2 last questions. The first one is regarding eligibility. Do applying organizations need to be, sorry, my screen is moving, need to be national in scale, or are subnational organizations welcome as well? And what if an organization is present in 2 separate eligible countries, for example, India and Sri Lanka? The handbook seems pretty country specific. Can an organization apply for both countries? The question is that we accept both national and regional and also cross-regional applications, as long as the bulk of the work will happen in the focus countries that we have listed. In addition to that, just to say that it is for the applicant to decide whether they want to focus on a country or a region, and also to ensure that as you do that, because we know that the system change that we seek is about deep change and it requires deep roots and understanding of the context, then we will be interested to know what is your experience in those countries and whether it is compelling. The other question is, based on my earlier response on research on the Global North research institutions not qualifying as lead agencies, does this mean that universities in the Global South can also not be leads? And no, universities in the Global South can be leads, and they are welcome. Universities and think tanks in the Global South can apply and be lead organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Andia. I'll take a few more live questions, and I think that's all the time we're going to have. We're getting quite a few questions about the catalytic grants and the women's led requirement, if this is 100%, or is it open for mixed organizations? Again, the catalytic grants are only for 100% women-led organizations. However, if you're applying as part of a consortium, this requirement does not apply to partners, but the lead organization, in other words, the person who is applying for the grant, the organization who's applying for the grant, does have to fulfill this requirement. There's a question around budgets for the catalytic grants. Do we need to submit a budget? Is there a minimum amount for this? And what if our initiative costs less than $1 million? So yes, budgets are a requirement for all grant types. Catalytic grants are, the amount is between $1 to $3 million. However, we might consider initiatives that are less than $1 million. You will have to justify this in your proposal, in your concept note, but you may apply for a lesser amount. If the initiative is for more than 5 years, can we apply for a catalytic grant as it is still in the stage of scaling? So the answer here is yes, if you can justify that the limit to scale has not necessarily been time. The objective of the catalytic grants is to provide organizations with the time and the resources for them to demonstrate the feasibility or the viability of an approach. In other words, you haven't had time to test or the viability, maybe you haven't had time to test what are the approaches to the root causes of the problem, or you haven't had time to create the partnerships and the coalitions that are required. So if you can demonstrate that in those 5 years in which your initiative has already sort of been operating, that time hasn't necessarily been the limit, or rather explain what the limitations have been, we could consider that proposal. In terms of the domain grants, are you imagining law and economics in narrow terms? In this regard, would you entertain an application that approaches law and economics more systemically in relation to culture and religion? So will you accept a domain grant application that is focused on feminist indigenous rethinking of religious norms and practices that will in turn impact leadership and gendered norms in the fields of law and economics, as well as family and society more broadly? So we're open to proposals that question the heterodoxy of the fields of law and economics. And we also really value the importance of context, the approach that is relevant to your context, and feminist and intersectional approaches. However, what needs to be clear in your proposal is exactly how this approach will change the fields of law and economics. In other words, how will feminist indigenous rethinking of religious norms and practices change the field of law and economics, and particularly for women as professionals in these fields? What institutions will your initiative target, and how will you change them? One more question around the domain grants. We would like to know if you're open to initiatives in the domain grants who aim to transform the political system in order to balance the representation between men and women. The answer is no. The focus is on economics and law and women as professionals in these fields. We of course acknowledge that many women are in political leadership roles, judges and ministers, for example, but the focus of the domain grants is on women as professionals, not as politicians. I'll hand over back to Guhe.
Thanks, Alfonsina. Jackson, if we could have the next slide and maybe the slide after that. Great, thank you. So thank you all for your submitting these really great questions and for bearing with us as we're trying to answer them as completely and as efficiently as possible. It's been really helpful to hear what was clear and what wasn't. We're learning so much and it will enable us to be better at sharing our process going forward. We hope it was helpful to you as well. We will be emailing a link to a recording of this webinar after the call that you may review and share with others, and we'll put it on our website as well. This will come with the slides. We'll also be sharing a short survey asking for your feedback. Please help us understand how we can improve. As my colleague Yasmin had mentioned, we are taking notes of the questions that weren't answered, and we'll be seeking to update our FAQ document periodically. So please check back in there if your question was not answered. There's also a space in the survey to ask any questions that you felt were not answered in this session. So to receive updates on the Gender Fund sourcing process, please go to the Gender Fund application page on our website to sign up for our update emails. Finally, as you can see from all the information we've shared, this grant opportunity is not for everyone. There may be very many terrific organizations doing really powerful work that do not fit the criteria we've laid out, but some definitely do. If you feel that the Co-Impact Gender Fund grant is right for your initiative, we would love to hear from you. Please apply. Please do so by our online application in good time before the December 20th deadline. Thank you so much for your interest and for joining us and for giving us your time. We are grateful to you all and the important work that you're doing. We look forward to learning more and being in touch soon. Thank you for your time. Bye.